Do you like Super Robot Wars or Advance Wars? Is Romance of the Three Kingdoms series something you like? Today's your lucky day then. I found this really neat game series called Chaos Galaxy. It has great pixel art, decent enough music, and surprisingly fun gameplay. The first game has 14 factions, whilst the second one has 12, if one does not include custom factions. And in one of those 12, there lies a pretty decent faction called East Galaxy Company. Some might find playing the in-game equivalent of Jeff Bezos combined with the VOC to be morally dubious, but when I see the 6-digit resource count on the upper left part of my screen, I ended up forgetting about it. This faction is focused on wielding railguns, which is the longest ranged kinetic-based weapon type in this game. It also helps that kinetic weapons don't trigger the beam fields that are used by the most common faction culture in the game, which are Imperials. Here is what I think of their units sorted from the ones I find most impactful to least. Number 1. Carrack Battleship. This humble 5-point warship is one of the best of its class in the game, owing to its choice of main weapon which can bypass beam fields with long range and the loot ability that it has. Never underestimate how useful the loot ability gets, especially since most fleets tend to have 1 or 2 support ships at most. This ability ensures that your support ships can spend most of their time locking enemy ships instead of supplying when fighting in prolonged battles or against EMP-armed opponents. The cannon secondaries are not as good as its main armament, but are still useful for breaking through magnetic fields, attacking in diagonals when pitted against enemies armed with only straight weapons, or generally do morale damage through the angled rear of an enemy. Number 2. Kraken Submarine. Hands down the best submarine in the game. What makes this so good is that despite having 5 movement and loot, this vehicle only costs you 6 command points. The long range of both the movement of the submarine and railguns makes it super easy to land hits first. Since it's also a submarine, you can also utilize the diving mechanic as a way to bypass magnetic fields that can 100% nullify your railguns if you're not diving. This faction's tech tree further buffs submarines, and that makes this particular vessel absolutely fearsome in combat, even if you're not using it with Blackbeard, a submarine commander that East Galaxy Company starts with. Number 3. Atlas Trade Ship. The only unique support ship in the game, and arguably one of the biggest advantages that this faction has. It might cost more in terms of command points and resources, but one should never underestimate how useful it is to have a support ship with 4 movement range instead of 3. For a ranged heavy fleet, the last thing you want to happen is your support ship lagging behind, which results in them not being able to do anything besides moving in a single turn. It also has more hit points than the standard support ship, which is very useful since enemies tend to target support ships. As for cannons, I don't really find it useful since it's far more useful to lock enemy units instead of using it. Still, a great unit to have overall and worth the extra points. Number 4. Prince Dreadnought. The most powerful unit this faction has, costing 10 command points. Armed with 4 railguns and 1 vortex torpedo, this ship can decimate anything that doesn't have magnetic field. Plus, if the enemy even has magnetic field, the ship can always use the torpedo to damage groups of enemies whilst repositioning to an enemy's rear to perform morale damage. Even if you get this without any ship upgrades, the Dreadnought has 6 movement range per turn, which means you won't have any trouble repositioning. A highly powerful feature this ship has is its auto repair, which when combined with its 3400 HP, means the ship usually never fails to retreat back to safety. The magnetic field is nice too if you decide to fight against factions that depend on ammunition weapons. Number 5. Magellan Cruiser. I find this 6-point unit not as powerful as the Kraken, although I still use it. Mostly because by the time I was able to recruit it, I've been facing factions that can nullify the railgun. The auto repair that it has is sort of questionable for me, since I find units with less than 2500 HP to die faster than ever being able to utilize this feature when fighting against humans. Not too fond of the radar as well, since the last thing I want to do with a unit with 3 railguns is using radar. Much prefer to just use the railguns every turn, since submarines aren't as powerful in Chaos Galaxy 2 when compared to the first one. The main advantage that it has compared to a Carrack battleship that costs 5 points instead of 6 is that the Magellan Cruiser has 3 railguns and 6 speed instead of the 4 that the Carrack has. So when you're pitted against factions that do not have magnetic field, this ship is somewhat better than the Carrack. I have to admit one thing however, this unit is also excellent for fighting aliens since loot is useless against them. Number 6. Musketeer. A 4-point mech unit with 3 railguns. Although this unit is by no means a bad one, I am not fond of it since mechs have assault for besieging planets instead of bombardment. The fact that this is the only decent mech unit in this faction and how most of the research doesn't benefit mechs means that this is a unit that will be obsolete rather quickly as your commanders level up and the more tech you've researched. Still, if you have a 4-point gap in your fleet and the commander is not someone who specializes in submarines like Blackbeard, having this unit is not a bad idea. Number 7. Privateer Submarine and Cog Trade Ship. I don't consider these two units bad by themselves. It's just that they tend to disappear from my fleets the longer the game goes on. Privateer Submarine is something I only use on Blackbeard, or if I have a 3-point gap and I can't afford the resource or time to fill the gaps by replacing ships with costlier ones. Problem with cannons is that this type of weapon means that a submarine has to be closer to an enemy when striking, and that's bad for a stealthy kind of unit like a submarine, especially a fragile one like this. Still, it's better than the standard mech unit this faction has for 3 points. The Cog trade ship, on the other hand, is bound to be replaced as soon as I research the Atlas trade ship. This is not a bad ship by any means, it's just overshadowed by something amazing. Number 8. Caravel Cruiser and Guild Mariner. Arguably the most useless units in the entire roster of the East Galaxy Company. The Caravel is near useless as it is armed with cannons, the worst type of weapon in the game. It might cost less to recruit than a Carrack battleship, and also has higher movement range, but it actually has less total range than a Carrack. What I meant by total range is the combined range of a weapon and the movement of a unit. Please do not recruit this. If you want to spend 4 command points, just get the Musketeer. You can literally research it in turn 1 with only 97 learning points. The Guild Mariner is bad since there is only 2 mech units that East Galaxy Company has, and the faction doesn't have anyone that can use mechs well. It not being a single entity unit like ships or submarines, combined with its melee range, slow for movement speed and piss poor hit points, makes it highly dubious. To add insult to injury, this unit is the second most fragile 3-point mech in the game. It's so bad that I actually prefer the Caravel over this. So far, I don't think I need to build arms factories whenever I play this faction, which is a great thing, since it ensures that you don't waste a single orbital facility slot on any planet. Another great thing about not missing out from not building arms factories is that, by default, they are inferior in terms of production when compared to shipyards. A single level 3 shipyard can produce up to 16 command point worth of units, while arms factories produce only 12 command point worth of units at level 3. That's all I can say when it comes to units. Now for the other features of this faction. The ability to invest in the proposals of your officers is somewhat questionable since gold as a resource in this game becomes less vital as the game goes on. I would have preferred if there was an option to earn more supplies or even learning points with this mechanic instead. As for the exchange mechanic, this was rather decent since it allows you to actually make use of the surplus gold that you'll inevitably have. Still, would have been better if I could also earn learning points or even alien knowledge from this. Both of these mechanics are tied with this faction's unique building, the Commodity Exchange. To me, this is an outstanding building, since it increases the amount of transactions that you can have without making the planet's citizens upset and also earns you gold. This faction also has great commanders. Claven increases your planetary supply income by 10% and is also an adequate commander. His strategic skill is highly situational since it requires 2 enemy fleets close to each other, but if he does manage to be near these 2 enemy fleets, this skill is insanely powerful. Lucrezia can pacify newly conquered planets with her strategic skill plus high admin stat. Her talent also reduces the upkeep of your fleets by 10%, which is huge. Blackbeard's high command combined with his tactical skill and talent with submarines makes him absolutely fearsome when paired with the faction's Kraken submarines. His strategic skill is rather dubious sadly, since I find that the prevalent amount of loot skill in this faction's roster makes it rarely useful. Yuri is an adequate combatant. His talent that adds extra fleet movement per month can be very helpful, whilst his tactical skill is affordable to use since it only spends energy, and this faction has plenty of units with loot skill, so energy is not an issue. His strategic skill is questionable since I find that sabotaging the enemy fleet with other more useful strategic skills to be better than just defending against the enemy's strategic skill. The policy tree of this faction is overall amazing, and it helps to ensure that you will almost never run out of resources, especially with the economic boon that mining acquisition and hedonism provides. One policy I don't like would be the new Tycoon one, since it increases unrest by 1 per turn. It might not seem a lot, but in early game that -1 point is worth a single farm or hive, city or mine, so I tend to research the other 2 trees first. That's all I can say about this faction. I hope it was useful or at the very least amusing. If it was, please subscribe, and as always, have a great time.